Hi everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, which is how to use your super to build your property portfolio with high cash flow properties. And I'm joined here with Geoff from GCT Property. Thanks, Geoff, for joining me tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me, Simon. Looking forward to some great content tonight.
Yeah, most definitely. So look, this is going to be recorded. So we'll send you a copy of the recording at some stage tomorrow. So obviously you can go through that, and anyone that's jumping on late can go through the recording as well. We are going to be doing a Q&A session at the end. So any questions that you've got, if you would just want to drop them in on the chat as we go through, and then we can cover those off at the end.
Fantastic.
So just a quick disclaimer before we get into it. Obviously, what Geoff and I are going to be covering off this evening is all general nature, not sort of going into any specific needs or circumstances. And obviously, you should look at your own financial position, objectives, requirements, and seek professional financial advice before making any financial decisions. That being said, if you'd like to discuss in detail with your personal circumstances after we catch up this evening, you could book a session with either myself or Geoff, whether it's to look at being able to use your super to purchase property, or whether it's to look at the property side of things. So either or, we'll send through a copy of our respective booking links in the replay when we send it out tomorrow.
Great.
So just a quick agenda of what we're going to be covering off this evening, just to go through a bit of information about who SMSF Wealth is, which is my business. Obviously, why you should use your super to invest in direct property, purchasing property through a self-managed super fund. Not all self-managed super funds are created equal, and what you need to know there. Bit of an overview on pricing and what's required to be able to use your super to purchase property. Then with Geoff, obviously a bit more of a lengthier introduction around Geoff and what he looks after there. Reasons why only 20% of the population own investment properties, what causes property values to increase, latest property market data, and some cash flow positive properties and case studies, which is what Geoff specialises in. So just a quick overview, SMSF Wealth, we're predominantly a financial planning firm. However, we do work in collaboration with a team of strategic partners, Geoff being one of them, to provide a comprehensive range of services. There's 5 different areas of focus that we work on, being asset protection, protective estate planning, wealth creation and wealth preservation, succession planning and protection planning. So obviously what we're covering off tonight fits in the wealth creation aspect, but we do overlay that with different areas around estate planning and asset protection, which we'll cover off as we go through. So a couple of key reasons as to why use your super to invest in direct property. Firstly, for those that have at least 300,000 combined in your super, now that can be across 6 people combined, whether that's members of your family, so it might be you and your partner, or you, your partner and your children. You can also include business partners, friends, whoever you want. The only stipulation there is it just can't be an employee and employer relationship unless you're related. So, if you're a family business and you employ your kids, then that's perfectly fine. You can include them. But if you're not related, then that can't be done there. But I guess the whole premise of being able to pool your super or your retirement savings together to be able to purchase property if building a property portfolio is your goal, as a great way to work more as a team, which is what we find a lot of the high net worth families do, as opposed to trying to do so as an individual or even a couple. As I'm sure you can appreciate, working as a team gets you to that goal a lot quicker. And essentially, if it's within the family, ultimately, the main goal is going to be to pass down those assets to your children as well. So, if you're working with adult children, they've got a bit of money in super, a good way to go there. Another option is, or another reason I should say, if you're struggling to get into the investment property market, that's obviously a good way to look at if you do qualify for that amount of super, because your borrowing capacity through a self-managed super fund is separate to your own personal name. The other aspect too is if you're a property investor and you've sort of got to that ceiling with the banks or the lenders where you've maxed out your borrowing capacity, can be a good way to go as far as being able to continue to build that property portfolio, but you're doing so using your super or your retirement savings. And then, you might purchase 1 or 2 properties through your super. And then by that stage, you might be ready to go again in your own personal name. So you can sort of work between both borrowing in your personal name or borrowing through different entities outside of super, such as trust structures and whatnot, and then utilise your property as well. So just as another way to be able to build a property portfolio quicker than without.
Yeah, it was something I wasn't aware of, Simon, that you can have up to 6 members. So I think it really opens a bit of a game changer for those that are looking to get on the property investment ladder and really struggling with the current super. It just opens it up to a lot more potential, I guess. There's just one question on there while we're talking about that, and that up to 6 parties in the super fund, would that be split by a percentage of how much they put into the super fund, or is it an equal share, or does each party have a share of that?
Great question, Geoff. So with that, you can either pool your money together. In saying that, you so have your amounts noted as you go through, or you can have segregated accounts as well. So, mum and dad might want to do their own thing together, and the kids might want to come in and do some property investing together, or depending on the amount that you've got there, you might be able to have enough there to all do it individually. But you can either pool your money or you can have it segregated in that respect. In regards to the 6 members, Geoff, that has changed in recent times. It was previously 4 people, but yeah, opening it up to 6 people now does offer a lot more opportunities for sure.
Great.
Excellent, good question. So look, this is just a simple overview of how it works buying property through your super. I do have a more detailed diagram I'll go through after this, but effectively you've got employer contributions, you've got your own voluntary super contributions going in, you've got rent from tenants, all go into your self-managed super fund. And then with that, you've got obviously the lender who, most people we find will need to borrow to purchase a property. However, depending on the size of your super fund balance, you might purchase a property outright. And in that respect, it's a little bit different. But looking at the case of if you have to lend, then that money that's in the super will then pay for the mortgage and property expenses. And then your property is held separately in trust, which I'll explain a little bit more detail just a second. And that's secured by a limited recourse loan there. And then obviously you've got the lease between the property and the tenant there too.
So that sort of operates, Simon, independently of your own personal finances, a self-managed super fund. Is that correct? Where all the income comes into the super fund and all the expenses of the property expenses are paid out of the super fund, correct?
100%, Geoff. Yep, that's exactly right. So separate to your own borrowing or lending outside of super, everything is contained within that super environment. So this diagram goes into a bit more detail there. So with that, you have a corporate trustee, which is a corporate trustee of the self-managed super fund, has an ACN only, as you can see there. Now, lenders will only lend if there is a corporate trustee in place. So you can have up to 6 members, as you can see there. So the SMSF is registered with the ATO. Obviously, it's got a bank account that's opened in its name. That's where all the super fund rollovers go originally. If you've got insurances that you run through your super, it would obviously come out there as well. Like we said, all the expenses and the rent goes through there. Then on the other side, you have a separate corporate trustee, and you have what's called a bare trust. So this facility is in place to be able to borrow with a lender. So with that, the reason it is held separately is a limited recourse borrowing arrangement. So with that, it being held separately from the super, if you were to ever default, then the banks can obviously only come after the property there, which is held separately to the super fund itself. Now, when you purchase multiple properties, you need separate bare trusts. So for each borrowing arrangement, you have a separate bare trust, which can all have the same corporate trustee over on this side, but you do need separate ones. Might sound a little bit complex. However, we can sort of go through that in more detail if needed.
Is there any, sorry, just a quick question, Simon, on those bare trusts, is there any limit to how many properties or bare trusts you can set up under that trustee?
No. So there's no limit, but as long as you have a bare trust per property. So each time that you borrow, and this is only in the case that you need to borrow to purchase the property. In the event that you purchased a property outright, then that would just be in the self-managed super fund straight away, as opposed to being through a bare trust arrangement with a trustee underneath. Now, a couple of notes with that too. If you are purchasing new properties, they must be done on a single contract. The borrowing arrangement is a little bit different than what you would do through your own personal name. So the loan to value ratio, or the LVR, when you're borrowing through a self-managed super fund, is 70%. So I guess for ease of calculations, if you're borrowing for $1 million, you'd need at least 300,000 as a deposit there to be able to borrow the rest. And as I touched on before, it is separate borrowing capacity to your own personal lending. So your own personal finances don't come into the picture when you're looking at borrowing through a self-managed super fund. The other aspect too, and I'll touch on it a bit more in a couple of slides coming up, but one of the things that we set up with self-managed super funds, or that they're quite unique as to, I guess, your standard self-managed super fund, is we set up what's called a leading member self-managed super fund. So with that, it's more so around the asset protection side of things and that succession planning aspect. So we have a line of succession where you have a leading member and the director of the corporate trustee at the top, and then you have that line of succession. So if you've got 6 members, you have them lined up in order. I mean, in some cases you might have mum and dad at the top and then the others below, but effectively the reason we have that is it's if the first leading member and director was to pass away or become incapacitated, then there's a seamless transfer down to the next leading member and successor director, etc., etc. So it's more so that line of succession for asset protection, estate planning, and succession planning. And with the self-managed super funds that we set up too, we have self-managed super fund wills with testamentary trust. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a couple of the slides coming up. But yeah, look, I can sort of go through any questions that anyone's got around that. So the steps involved in being able to purchase a property through your super. So initially we help you set up a self-managed super fund and bare trust with the help of one of our legal strategic partners. For asset protection, like I said, it's always best to have that corporate trustee, plus it's also a requirement with SMSF lenders if you're going to borrow for a property. From there, and it's a very quick turnaround to get that self-managed super fund and bare trust set up originally. From there, you can make a contribution straight away with as little as $1,000 in a lot of cases after the SMSF and bare trust are set up. and that will secure the property, which is obviously subject to finance. So we can help with that, help with the paperwork for that transaction as well. Then from this point, we put together what's called a statement of advice, which is a bit of a longer process, but you've already secured the property. So then we help with your rollovers from all your different existing super funds. So that's across the board with all the different members. Organise a SMSF cash flow statement for the lender, looking forward for 15 years. And obviously we can assist with the lending through one of our SMSF specialist lenders if needed as well, if you don't already have a broker lined up. Then we help with compliance on the requirements of personal insurances, which is what's required to satisfy most lenders. Assist with SMSF estate planning, and then obviously once that property's been purchased, we can help with the ongoing compliance and management of your self-managed super fund moving forward. So pretty straightforward process. Obviously it's a lot more involved than just a simple 7 steps, but just sort of looking at a high level.
Can you explain, Simon, just how important the statement of advice is and the point of that for the client's protection? I think that's really
yeah, look, most definitely, Geoff. I mean, being a financial planning firm, we're under heavy regulations with obviously providing advice with different investment opportunities for clients and everything that's involved in this whole process. So a statement of advice is a written document that we need to put together by law, which outlines everything in regards to the advice of being able to facilitate this transaction of rolling all your super into the self-managed super fund, obviously going through the process of borrowing if that's required, obviously the compliance around the insurances, estate planning and whatnot. But obviously with financial advice, one of the key I guess rules and regulations that we've had to adhere to for many years, which I think is a really big thing, is best interest duty. So in saying that, all the advice that's given must be in your best interest. And obviously we back that up with all the facts and figures there through the statement of advice. So at least you've got that there to know that, yes, what you're doing is going to work for you and provide you with a much better outcome than what you're currently involved with or currently what you're doing at the moment. Does that answer the question enough for you, Geoff? Yep.
Thank you, Simon. That was great. I just thought it was really important to share that. So thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And look, it's, I guess, just a peace of mind too, people knowing that, yes, look, you've got a written document there that's, I guess, backing up all the facts and figures and, the fact that it is going to be in your best interest to put all that in place. So next slide is a big one. Not all self-managed super funds or SMSFs are created equal, and what you need to know. So I guess self-managed super funds in general, they fall into 3 different categories. You've got the DIY SMSF, which is basically you do it all yourself. You manage the self-managed super fund, you organise your own investment strategy, you work out your own contribution strategies, work out your own pension strategies. But we find from experience, due to a lack of advice and expertise from most of the population, there's a lot higher costs in missed opportunities, both from savings or tax savings, I should say, and investment opportunities than if you were to seek professional advice. The next category, which is what we find the majority of current self-managed super funds, is your standard accountant, lawyer, established SMSF. Generally with those, there's sort of 1 to 2 members of the fund. Obviously, you do your investing, you've got your insurance there. Estate planning at best, you've probably got a binding death benefit nomination. Issue is, of recent times, a lot of those are being contested in the courts, and they're not as solid or straightforward as what people would like to believe. And then obviously you've got different taxation strategies, so contribution strategies and different things to offset personal tax. So with that, you obviously have accountants and financial advisors that help clients there. A couple of the big things that we normally see with those is they're generally exposed. There's no successor director for the corporate trustee or a line of succession to take over in the event of members passing away or becoming incapacitated, which is a big thing we see at the moment, and obviously coming up. If you don't have that taken care of, then the super in a lot of cases, especially with binding death benefit nominations, will be directed to people's estate. And there's a large volume increase in family provision claims through the courts. New South Wales is the worst state around, where family members, ex-partners, friends, whoever comes out of the woodwork, especially when they know that there's some assets on the line, can put in place a family provision claim, and whether it's successful or not, your estate or your assets can be tied up in the courts for 2 to 3 years, with your estate footing the legal bills. So that's one of the things that we look at with that protective estate planning, is having very little, if anything, being directed to the estate, and obviously having that line of succession too, with succession planning. So what we put in place, which I touched on before, is that leading member family self-managed super fund. It really is the ultimate in family wealth accumulation and being able to leave that legacy. Once again, working as a team always gets you to achieving goals a lot quicker than as an individual. Having that line of succession provides that seamless control from one leading family member down to the next. And also too, it's there to protect your bloodline too, which is a big thing that we do with asset protection. Like I touched on before, having that SMSF will with testamentary trust is a big thing there as well. So that's the big difference there. Just a bit of an overview of, I guess, the setup, upgrade in pricing and whatnot. So everyone's circumstances are a little bit different, but I guess the structure in itself always remains the same. So if we're setting up a new leading member self-managed super fund with corporate trustee, so with a corporate trustee, we always have that successor director or that line of succession in place, and also has a deed of indemnity. We won't just do this with corporate trustees, we do it with any business entity. So whoever's stepping in the shoes of the next person has that deed of indemnity. We can upgrade your existing self-managed super fund and corporate trustee. So if you've already got something in place, we can upgrade that. Obviously setting up a bare trust with corporate trustee. And once again, if you've got a bare trust and corporate trustee set up, we can upgrade what you've got in place. In regards to the rest of the steps, like I said, we put in place that, we provide that statement of advice and implementation. So it's the ABN, the TFN that we help with, the investment strategy, contribution advice and rollovers from your existing funds for all members, insurance advice for all members, preparing everything for the lender, and estate planning with documents as well. So bit of a range, and this really comes back to your own circumstances, which we can discuss afterwards, but 10 to 15,000 pretty much is going to cover it all, including the setup documents. And obviously when you divide that among however the total members are, it does obviously bring it down quite a bit. And that can be paid for by your super as well. So it doesn't have to be an out-of-pocket expense. So it can be structured quite well in that respect.
I can ask a question, Simon, on that. You mentioned earlier, these self-managed super funds are very heavily regulated, just like a traditional super fund. So for anyone, there is a lot of setup, as we can see there, a lot of tasks and costs involved. Now, can you just explain, I know it's a very heavy regulated industry, as it should be, because it is our retirement fund. Some of the penalties if clients don't get this right or don't have the right protection or try and set up themselves. So I know it can be quite serious penalties.
Yes, Geoff, you're definitely right. And look, I guess like I touched on before with the DIY super, trying to do it all yourself, it can be a lot of missed opportunities. Penalties are a big thing if you're running a non-compliant self-managed super fund. Now, any self-managed super fund deed that is older than 2019 really needs to be upgraded or updated, because anything prior to that is pretty much non-compliant in the eyes of the ATO anyway. But if you are running a non-compliant self-managed super fund, which the ATO regulates, in extreme cases, you can be fined up to 50% of your super.
Wow.
So that's half your retirement down the drain.
Yeah, wow.
So look, yeah, ultimately having a self-managed super fund as a trustee, you're responsible for it. But it comes back to obviously utilising the right professionals to be able to help with that whole process of setting it up, but also maintaining the compliance of the fund, and obviously running it in the future. So, different things like every year you need to have a new investment strategy done, or at least update your investment strategy. There's a lot of other different aspects with the ongoing compliance as well. So look, we can help that with different partners that we work with as well. But yeah, definitely is a lot better having the right professionals to help set it up and to obviously manage that ongoing with your input as well, going forward.
Great.
So from here, Geoff, over to you if you'd like to introduce yourself a bit further and explain what GCT Property is all about.
Sure. Thank you, Simon. I think that was really insightful information and just showing everyone how important it is to get it right. And I see a lot more inquiries from my business point of view about self-managed super funds over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. And, having that right information before you even look at it is really important. So my name is Geoff Tomkins. I'm a property buyer's agent, primarily in the Southeast Queensland property market. Always had a passion for property and property investment, been investing actually in New Zealand originally. So between New Zealand and Australia, over 30 years investing in real estate. Currently an investor myself. And it's really important to, when you're speaking to people or taking advice from specialists in their industry, that have some real hands-on experience. So love property, always been involved in property, from new construction, renovating existing properties, right to small lots land subdivision. So wealth of knowledge, and I still love property and get excited every day that I'm on the road inspecting for clients. So
Good stuff.
okay, the property investing wealth curve. So when you look at those most successful wealthy people that have created a lot of wealth, a lot of them, it's created by investing in assets, not by saving money in the bank at the moment. As we know, with inflation running a lot higher than it has been, and low interest rates on our return on our investment, really saving to retirement is quite a challenge for a lot of people. And if you look at those most successful people that have created wealth through investing in assets. So, and property is probably, when you look at the banks, they lend more money against a property than they do against shares or a business. So it just shows you that even the banks, the major banks, and all the banks, in fact, have got more confidence in the long-term growth of the property market. But of course, property investment is generally a long-term gain. We can't guarantee the short-term gains. I know we've seen some phenomenal growth over the last few years, but we look at the long-term growth. It's been a very steady average. Okay, reasons why only 20% of the population own investment property. Just like anything in life, if you want to be successful, you need, most people take advice from a coach. So if you're a sporting person, or a league team, a team member, or an individual sporting star, you will see they will have coaches, health coaches, exercise plans. So something happened with someone that's been there before and done that and is guiding you, you've got a lot better chance of being successful. It comes back to property. Having that experience and know what's going to work and what's not going to work is very important. Success does leave clues. So when we got started in property investment, we all, I think every one of us has made mistakes, but the benefit of having someone experienced is they've learned those mistakes, so they can guide you in the right manner. Qualified people are very important when you're looking to build a property portfolio. There is a lot of moving parts. There is a lot of specialists. If you're looking at property in a self-managed super fund, you're relying on Simon as the financial planner, solicitors, finance experts, property sourcing experts, property managers, insurance specialists. There's a whole range of specialists. So having that team around you will give you that more confidence and give you a much more better chance of being successful in making that first investment property a success, which will give you that confidence to go on and build your property. And when we talk about property investment, it's very different when we're buying our home to live in. So when we buy our own home, it's generally based on emotional, it suits the family or a lifestyle or affordability. Really, the investment property should be based on numbers, facts and figures. And that's where, as a property investor myself, I always come back to those stats, facts, figures, cash flow forecasts. All those numbers are really important to get those right and understand how that property is going to perform before you make the decision on that property. So we all say.
Sorry, Geoff, I was just going to say with that too. Heard plenty of stories over the years where people have been caught out purchasing the wrong property. And I think it's just really important having someone like yourself on their team to help find the right property, but one that is based on those facts and figures and numbers as well, which I know that you're going to share more of as we go through, as opposed to, I guess, just speaking to a real estate agent and, obviously understanding that they're acting for the seller and they're there to do a job, sell the property, as opposed to showing you the facts and the figures and that it's going to be a good investment.
Yep, good point. Okay, so what causes property prices to increase in value? So a number of factors there. So the demographics, the type of people based on incomes is very, very important. Population growth is probably the biggest driver of capital growth. And we've seen some phenomenal figures, which we'll share shortly, in terms of the population growth into Australia. And of course, the wealth of the nation. And it's a good point because when you look at, we all know the cost of living has gone up, property prices have gone up. But when we look at the rest of the world, I think Australia is viewed as a pretty good country to invest in. We are seeing a lot of international funds coming into Australia to invest in real estate and other areas because of that security and fundamental success and long-term performance of property investment. So there's a number of factors, and I think when you look at the worldwide stage, Australia is in a very good position. Our banks have got pretty good credit ratings, and we're viewed as very stable, which is a good thing.
Definitely.
We talked about population growth, what's driving, which is one of the biggest drivers of property prices. And there was forecast 400,000 new immigrants to come into Australia last year. I read a figure recently. There was actually just over 600,000, which is staggering. 200,000 more than they forecast. Why is that so? I think there's a number of reasons. We talked about, Australia, very safe, very secure, land of opportunity. I know there's a lot of immigrants coming to Australia and can't believe how lucky we are, living here. And we are very fortunate. So this strong international migration that the government's allowed, but again, we can't control that. It's a government policy. They are allowing it. And the thing about this immigration coming in, I think, Simon, that's really important is we are seeing a lot of wealthy people coming into Australia. Australia is actually quite tough to get into from other countries. The government's got quite strict guidelines. And I read an interesting fact the other day. Australia last year had more immigrants come in with a net wealth of more than $1 million than anywhere in the world. 5,200 people came in with a net worth of more than $1 million into Australia, which was more than America, the second biggest nation. So that just proves, we are attracting high net worth people into Australia, and that is having an effect on the rental market and also the property prices themselves. So we've got strong international migration. We're talking tonight about the Southeast Queensland corridor, which is performing extremely well. It's got the highest population growth in Australia. So we talk about drivers for property price growth going into the future, and currently Queensland's averaging about 1.8 to 2% per year, which is well above the long-term average, and that's forecast to continue. I think there was a number of reasons for that, obviously coming out of COVID. A lot of people could work remotely. A lot of people changed their vision, I guess, on life and looking to move for lifestyle and affordability, and Queensland pretty much came up on top of that. So we're seeing that strong interstate migration over the last 3 to 4 years. Now we're seeing that massive international migration, which the government has forecast is going to continue, for the next few years, Simon.
Yeah, definitely. And they're all good key driving factors, as you said, Geoff, which is, once again, the fundamentals of a good property investment.
Correct. Okay, we all know in most areas rents have really accelerated, and again, it's just true that demand in here, that population growth. So yes, sure, property prices have increased, which affects our yields, but also the rents have increased as well. I'm currently myself and Simon live on the Gold Coast, and it is blowing your mind how much rents are increasing. We're hearing stories of rents increasing by $100, $200, $300 per week from the previous rent, which is unheard of. As a property investor, that gives you confidence, and obviously the increasing rent helps your yield. So property that might not be performing great today, in 12 or 24 months as the rents increase, that yield will improve. So again, it's looking at property investment, and not just today or next week, it's over the next 1, 2, 5, 10 year cycle. So the rental growth there, very, very strong. You see Brisbane there, 12.2% increase, last year was phenomenal in rental growth.
Definitely.
Latest data from CoreLogic, the largest valuation service provider in Australia, and again, some phenomenal results in many, many parts of Australia. So again, tonight we're talking about the Southeast Queensland Brisbane corridor, and the capital growth over the last 12 months in Brisbane was 15.9%, which is pretty much double the long-term average. So that just these facts and figures we talked about earlier are really relevant and really important to say, should we make a decision today, or should we sit on the fence for 6 or 12 months? And those facts are showing, Brisbane growing by on average about 1% per month, which is, phenomenal. And if you look at the median price, the other surprising thing about Brisbane, it's actually overtaken Melbourne in the terms of median price, which is first time I've seen it in my career investing in Australia. So quite phenomenal. So that it's quite amazing, isn't it, Simon?
Yeah, no, never seen that before. It's normally lagging behind Melbourne, but yeah, no,
I've been here 24 years, and it's always Sydney and Melbourne that's led the property market in Australia. The market's really shifted. So Adelaide, Brisbane, and Perth are really coming into their own, giving great returns at the moment. And we talked about earlier about that, the initial setup of the self-managed super fund, that 10 to 15,000. And based on those figures that you're seeing in front of you, you're going to recover that in Brisbane on a $800,000 property within 2 months of capital growth in today's figures. So that setup cost is insignificant in the long-term growth of the property. And we're seeing these results. I'm seeing these results in real life figures. Just this week had a first home buyer that came to me 4 years ago, was wanting to get on the property ladder, wasn't quite ready, and met him at the gym and gave him a bit of a plan and worked with the finance professional as well as myself. Worked very hard, 3 years, and we secured a new property in June last year. Just got handover this week, in fact, with this brand new property in a beautiful estate in Greenbank, Covella, and his land price from what he paid in June last year, under 12 months, is already up $47,000 to replace that same block of dirt today, Simon. So quite incredible.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
Okay, so what are we looking at for Brisbane? Well, you can see the growth of the population there, 1.2 million by 2030, phenomenal. So we talked about what's going to happen. We've talked about the results over the last few years, been very, very strong. What's going to happen coming up to, obviously, Brisbane's got the Olympic Games coming up in 9 years' time, and a lot of infrastructure, a lot of workers needed to complete these infrastructure and facilities for the Olympic Games. And those workers are driving, they need somewhere to live, rent or buy property. And there's a combination of facts. So very strong facts for Queensland.
Definitely.
Another surprising thing by ComSec there, Queensland's been the strongest performing state of late, which is, again, quite phenomenal,
Yeah, 100%.
We talk about those facts and figures. That's exactly what we're looking at.
Mm.
So what to look for when we're looking for, we talked about yield and positive cash flow properties, which is, one of the benefits of having these high income properties. There's several benefits. We all know interest rates have gone up over the last 2 or 3 years. They are still well below the long-term average. My first property I bought in New Zealand, interest rates were 20%. So talking about that 6 to 8% interest rates now, it's still higher than it was 2 or 3 years ago, admittedly, which admittedly affects our cash flow, our holding cost. So what we're seeing with a lot of smart investors now is they're looking for higher income properties to offset those higher interest rates.
Yeah,
so what do we look for? We're looking for positive cash flow properties. We're looking in areas where there's a shortage of rental properties, so vacancy rates. What's considered a tight rental market is around about 3%. So if you're looking at areas to invest, anything under 3% is quite a tight market, which is many parts of Australia. Queensland's got vacancy rates under 2%. Properties with multiple income sources. So we're all looking to create that extra income source. And in your self-managed super fund, obviously you want that property positively geared, which means it's growing in value as well as cash flow. And a property with more than one income stream is certainly going to perform there. It gives you a higher net yield. So when we're looking at figures being quoted on properties and returns, it's generally the gross figure, but what's more important is the net yield. So we're looking for that higher net yield. A lot of property is quoted with high gross figures. So I know a lot of short-term stays or holiday type properties, which their gross return or yield looks very appealing, but when you look at all the holding costs, it can really erode into that actual net yield. So it's net yield that really counts. So just a little tip there for those new to property investment. And we're looking for properties with a bit of a unique factor that's going to help add the value as well. Okay, so a concept in many parts of Australia that's really growing in popularity is what's known as co-living. We all know that we are in a rental crisis. We talked about the demographics earlier changing, and the demographics are definitely changing. So what we're seeing now in the general population is there's more single people coming out of relationships, or people that haven't got into relationships. So there's more single people looking for accommodation. And unfortunately, when they go to apply for a unit or a house for the rental property, they're missing out because they're competing against couples or people that have got 2 or 3 income sources or families. So these single people are really being forced into some pretty dire accommodation situations now, and really being forced out of the rental market. So we've come up with a great solution to help these single people, and this is known as co-living. So hopefully on the screen there you can see the floor plan, but I'll just briefly explain it. It's essentially a 3 or 4 bedroom traditional house with a few modifications. These are purpose-built specialist properties. So some of the key differences are we have 3 individual bedrooms with en suites. We have lockable doors on the front door and all the bedrooms. Each bedroom has its own ensuite. We make the bedroom slightly larger, and common living area, and also lockable pantries. So what we can do in these is we can have 3 separate tenants on separate leases, all paying rent. So that gives us a much higher rental income. So 3 individual tenants, they all have their own leases, purpose-built property, brand new, to maximise the depreciation of the property, also minimise the maintenance. So we see a lot of older properties now. We all know, renovation costs have really escalated over the last few years, labour and materials. So these are brand new, purpose-built, ready to go, rent out and start creating, immediate income from day one. And these are generating on average around about 35% more rental income. And they're great. And when you come to sell your property at retirement, which is, the whole point of putting this property in your super fund to generate your wealth to retire on, you could sell this property to a home buyer as a traditional 3 or 4 bedroom home, extra bathrooms, which is perfect if you've got a elderly parent that lives with you, or got children that can't afford to get into their own home or unit. They can still live with their own privacy. Or you could sell it to an investor for the higher yield. So it really gives you 2 extra strategies, which is obviously going to maximise the end value of the property.
Yeah, 100%, Geoff. And it's always good to have a well planned out exit strategy if and when you want to sell down these properties too.
Correct. So this is a case study. So we talk about, dealing with experts and dealing with people that have been through this process before. It's going to give you a much stronger chance of success. So co-living is a concept that's been introduced to cater for that, but it's really important to get it right. So this is a case study of one of my clients that's bought a co-living in the Brisbane north side in a suburb called Narangba. So when I did the cash flow forecast, we forecast about $300 per room for the 3 rooms, which is about $900 per week. On handover, which was just after Christmas, we achieved $350 per room. So from day one, that was $1,050 or $150 per week more, or $7,500 per year more rental income, which is massive, Simon.
Well, 100%. Yeah, like you said, Geoff, with rising interest rates, it's having that extra income to offset that and still be cash positive.
Yeah, and you can see from the front there, that's the photo. Nice looking property from the street, just looks like a traditional home, and inside just a few modifications to cater for the individual tenants.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, another concept of high cash flow properties is known as dual occupancy. So these are essentially 2 units side by side, and it could be a 3 or 4 bedroom unit on one side, on the larger size. So in this case, looking at the photo would be on the right hand side. So that'd be a 3 or 4 bedroom residence with ensuite, so 2 bathrooms. And on the left hand side is 1 or 2 bedroom unit as well, auxiliary dwelling. So again, very similar sort of cash flow numbers. Another great way of increasing your rental income. I've built a couple of these myself in my own portfolio, so really believing in the product and seeing great returns now. So these individually power to each unit, individually water meters to each unit, so you separate tenants, separate leases. If you're more comfortable with the style of high income property, it works very, very well. So separate tenants, separate leases, and you rent them out individually. Again, if you come to sell the property, you could sell it to a home buyer that would like to rent the auxiliary dwelling out to create that extra income. They might have an elderly parent that could live in the unit next door, or they might have teenage children entering the workforce which can't afford to go into a unit or a house, and they can rent this property off you. It gives you so many options there. Increases your income while you're holding the property, but also increases your value. So very stylish properties there. Again, new built, modern, very, very low maintenance, and really catering for that smaller demographic as well.
Definitely.
I'm sure everyone will have questions about the co-living and the dual occupancy. So you'll see a chat box on the top of the screen there. So please type in the questions as Simon and myself are running through this webinar, because we'll have time to go back and answer those questions. So I can see a few questions have already come in, but I think tonight's the night to really understand these types of properties. We are limited within the hours, but we'll have plenty of time for the Q&A. So yeah, please fire those questions through. We'll both do our best to answer those. So here's a cash flow breakdown, a fairly basic cash flow breakdown of a standard traditional type house, existing house, compared to one of these high cash flow properties, just to show you the difference. We talked about numbers, facts and figures earlier, really, really important. So on the left-hand side, we have a property worth about $800,000. So in Brisbane, that's going to generate around about $700 per week for a traditional house. So we've got the rental income, minimal tax savings as an existing house. So we've got total income there of $37,000. Loan repayments based there on about a 20% deposit plus purchase costs. So total income there, $37,000. So the loan repayments of $42,000. Property expenses, so that's the rates, insurance, property management costs of about $8,000 per year. So total outgoings of $50,000. So that property is negatively geared about $13,000 per annum. So quite, what's that, $220, $230 per week negatively geared. So imagine that super fund, you're actually having to make up that shortfall. So it's quite a burden based on those figures. And on the right-hand side of the screen is a comparison of one of these higher cash flow type properties based on around about the same purchase price. So you can see the rental income is significantly higher there. You've also got your super contributions going in the self-managed super fund, the tax savings there, much higher. So total income of about $61,000, loan repayments of about $42,000, property expenses $12,000, a bit higher because there's more work involved, one of these multi-income type properties. So the yearly outgoings of about $52,000 compared to total income of about $61,000. So in the self-managed super fund, that property is about $9,000 per annum positively geared. So quite a significant difference if you're comparing the existing property outside of super to a high cash flow property in your self-managed super fund. Huge difference here.
Yeah, definitely.
And that income can cover all the other expenses and put money in your pocket and build up that surplus cash, and also build up those reserves in your super fund as well. So maybe if you've got long time to retirement, they could build up, potentially towards another deposit, or use that savings to pay the loan down earlier at retirement on the debt on that property. Here's a dual income property, another success story from one of my Sydney investors. Built a property, we got it constructed. It was handed over late last year. The property was purchased for $692,650, and it's currently worth over $800,000. So capital gain of about $108,000 in 12 months. And based on that deposit that was required for that property, that 10% deposit on that property, that's about 100% return on investment, which is fantastic. Also, the rental income there was dramatically increased. We estimated on the forecast, the rental letter from the property manager for the 2 units, so this is a dual occupancy, was about $750 a week. We achieved $900 a week from day one. So again, amazing, extra income from the day the property was handed over. So that's the facts of the market we're in Queensland.
Yeah, definitely.
So we talked about these high cash flow properties, but as a buyer's agent, yes, we can source existing properties, standard traditional houses, townhouses, duplex pairs, property development, etc. as well. So we all know, as unique investors, we have a different sort of requirement, but we are talking about tonight about property and self-managed super fund. And as Simon mentioned earlier, it must be a single contract property, and we don't want a high maintenance renovator type property in a self-managed super fund. We need to have something that's going to be pretty low maintenance, take care of itself, and add to your cash flow, and also your your capital growth as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so in the chat box there, if you'd like to speak to myself or Simon, if you just put a chat property or financial planner. So if you put a message in the chat box, Simon will have all the contact details, and myself or Simon will reach out to you to discuss myself if it's regarding the property side of it, or if it's setting up the self-managed super fund, which is the first step to Simon himself. We can book a link in there. We'll put in the email tomorrow that Simon's going to send out an email with a recording of the webinar, so you can go through and review the slides. And in that link, we'll have a strategy session if you'd like to book a call with myself. And Simon, I'm sure you'll have your own link in there as well.
Yeah, exactly right. Excellent. Thanks, Geoff, for everything that you've covered off. And now if we sort of open up to a few of the different questions that we've got in the chat there. So how long does it take to set up a SMSF? So through what we work with our legal strategic partner, we can do that turnaround very quickly within a matter of days. And then obviously people can make that contribution of at least $1,000 to secure that property originally. And then obviously that's the property secured, the SMSF is set up, and then we go through the process of a statement of advice, which is a bit longer, and getting those contributions into the self-managed super fund to finalise the purchase. So setup originally is fairly quick, and then we sort of go from there through the process.
I think that's a great point, because in Queensland or southeast Queensland, we are in a pretty strong property market. Properties are going amazingly fast. There's a lot of demand. There's more demand than supply. Speaking to a local real estate agent on the Gold Coast last weekend, he had 3 open homes and he had 74 people through existing properties. So there's a lot of competition out there. So one of the benefits of working with myself is I have access to these high cash flow off-market properties, but we do need to secure them pretty quick. So as Simon mentioned, you can secure a property. So I'll just explain the process, because I know some questions about how we go about securing a property. So if we see something that stacks up, we can secure it with initial deposit. It's very safe, goes into a trust account. That deposit will depend on the seller generally between about $1,000 to $10,000. That's fully refundable. That'll secure the property. It'll take it off the market. Then we get contract, so it'll be a single contract. That we make sure that we've got a finance clause in that contract if we need finance, because that contract is required by your lender. So before you can actually, say we're definitely going ahead with that property, we need to have a finance approval. Before we need to have a finance approval, we need to have a contract of sale in place. And as Simon mentioned, you can set the self-managed super fund up quite quickly, Simon, to secure the property in the trust name.
100%, yeah. So that can happen within a matter of days, and then that deposit of at least $1,000 can obviously secure the property on your end, and we can get the paperwork drawn up to facilitate that whole transaction.
Okay, so Mike's asked a question, what are the costs around using a buyer's agent? So so it's a good question, Mike. It depends on the type of property. If we're talking about these brand new high cash flow properties, my fee is included in the purchase price. So it's all included, and that's a full service, Mike. So right through from, talking about the discussions, showing you the cash flow of how the property would work, working on your brief for the property requirement, right through to securing the property, right through to handing over the property and introducing you to a property manager. So full service if it's a new property. If it's an existing property, there's a cost, and it'll depend on the property. So welcome to, if you'd like to have a discussion around that, how that all works. You put just a message, Mike, in the chat box property, and I can speak to you a bit more detail.
Good point. So there's a question in respect to being the bare minimum to start a self-managed super fund. Alicia there. Look, the ATO recommend 250 to 300,000 as a bare minimum with a self-managed super fund. Realistically, it comes back to what that purchase price is. So I guess sort of looking at Geoff's end, depending on what the property is that you're looking to purchase, just bearing in mind that 70% as a LVR with most lenders in the SMSF space. So once again, if the property price point's around $1 million, then you're going to need around 300,000 to satisfy the lending criteria there. With always good to have a bit of a buffer there as well, with obviously the setup and whatnot. But yeah, look, obviously the more the better, but then having that opportunity to pool capital across 6 people does assist in getting those figures up.
Right. I know there's questions around, how much do these properties, these high cash flow properties, cost. In Southeast Queensland, these types of properties that we demonstrated on the screen today start from about 750,000 upwards, depending on the location and the size of the property. But the co-living from about 750 up in these growth locations. And we can actually, Tom's asked about the Gold Coast. Yes, we can even secure a property on the Gold Coast, which is pretty in a very high demand area, the Gold Coast. And it's giving investors and homeowners great returns, fantastic returns, better returns than I've ever seen in my 30 plus years of property investment. So I think if you own real estate on the Gold Coast, or you purchase real estate on the Gold Coast, the growth is going to be very, very strong.
Yeah, definitely. Sanjeev asked about restrictions while using SMSF for property investment development. Great point. So there's a couple of different aspects there. So you can't, and I've got a list of a few different questions that I've had asked to me in the past, which I'll go through, and one of them does talk about the restrictions. But with purchasing a property through an SMSF, look, it can't be used as a holiday home. It can't be rented to yourself and or family members or relatives as such. So a few of the things to bear in mind there. Renovating a property inside a SMSF. So things like simple, insignificant repairs and maintenance to the property can be paid for by borrowed monies. But if you do wish to do any significant improvements or renovations to the property, it either must be funded by available cash, or anything that's significant must be done under another limited recourse borrowing arrangement. So obviously another structure there. A few of the other things there too, in regards to some of the restrictions there. Yeah, it's just making sure that you've got that money to purchase the property in the first place. But a few restrictions there. You can't move property outside of super into your SMSF, but that's probably the gist of it.
In terms of, I think Sanjeev's another great question there about property development. So in a scenario, Simon, and there's a great question, if you bought a property with a land component, can you develop the rest of the property, or can you buy a property at a development site that doesn't have the cash flow? Obviously, that's going to be quite a negative gear type property. Does that cause any issues within the self-managed super fund, or?
Yeah, look, there are a few different cases where you can, the SMSF can do a JV to do different developments, but that's really sort of on a case-by-case basis. So for that side of things, it's probably better to discuss in more detail the exact circumstances, and I can give a more definitive answer around there. But look, there are different ways of structuring that where it's doing a joint venture, but yeah, need to sort of go into more specific details around that.
Yeah, I think when we talk about, I've got clients doing property development, is a lot more complicated. There's a lot more time involved. So I think, if you're looking at a property in your super fund, you're looking for something that's just going to stand alone, rent out, cover itself in expenses and grow in capital growth. I think once you get into property development, I see clients, it's a lot of time and a lot of expense involved. And I guess it would be a lot more challenging if it's within the self-managed super fund. You've got restrictions on there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I've got a couple of questions and answers I thought I'd just quickly run through that haven't been asked, but maybe can be of assistance. So in the past, I've had questions around, can the trustee be the same for the SMSF and the Bear Trust, which is no, because it breaches super laws. What is the name of the on the contract for purchasing the property? So it's the corporate trustee as trustee for the Bear Trust. Another question I've had in the past is what happens to the property once the loan is paid out? So the Bear Trust and the corporate trustee is simply there to facilitate the borrowing or the lending facility to purchase that property originally. Once the property's paid out or the loan's paid out, the property is then transferred from the Bear Trust to the SMSF, and there's no stamp duty or capital gains tax that's required there. What's the borrowing based on through a self-managed super fund? Like I said, initially, it's not through your own personal borrowing. It's done separately. So a couple of the key lending requirements is having sufficient money as a deposit, obviously bearing in mind the 70% LVR, having sufficient money going into the self-managed super fund to cover any shortfalls, such as contributions if the property is negatively geared. So I guess in some of those scenarios that you pointed out before, Geoff, if it's negatively geared, then you've got to top up that shortfall. So part of what we do with the statement of advice is we work out a 15-year SMSF cash flow statement for you, so that obviously going into that transaction, you have that confidence knowing that it's going to work for you, which is all part of that statement of advice. Obviously having the valuation on the property that stacks up for the lender. And then obviously making sure that you've got insurances in place to satisfy the lender if required. In regards to do all members of the self-managed super fund need to be directors of the trustee? So not with the leading member structure that we work with. However, the leading member must have EPOAs or enduring powers of attorney over the other members, which we set all that stuff up at the start. How does the leading member work with the self-managed super fund? So the leading member controls the self-managed super fund for the benefit of all members, and then seamless passing down to the next leading member on death or incapacity. And working in that structure, it's a very quick turnaround on all document execution, as you're only dealing with the one person as opposed to six. And in that structure too, all members do get a say in the investments with the leading member's self-managed super fund. I touched on before about holiday homes and whatnot that you can't do, and renovations of properties and whatnot. The only other one that I've had in the past is, I guess, the tax consequences of purchasing property through a SMSF. So for those that you aren't aware, the self-managed super fund pays 15% tax on the rental income received. As it currently stands under legislation, on any properties held longer than 12 months in a self-managed super fund, the SMSF receives a third discount on capital gains tax. So it brings that down to 10%.
Right.
If you purchase a property with a loan through a bear trust, then the interest payments are tax deductible along with the expenses for the property. And any tax losses are carried forward to offset any future taxable income of the SMSF. And also too, once members go into pension phase, so that can be done with correct planning from age 60, then their portion of the self-managed super fund is tax-free on income and capital gains tax as well.
Now, I've got a great question for you, Simon. In terms of, I know there's some great tax incentives. So if a client's on a high taxable income and paying a huge amount of tax, what's the tax? So if they've got a property in the self-managed super fund and they're on a high taxable income and they're doing extra member contributions to that super fund, what's their tax rate putting into the super fund there?
Yeah, great question, and it really does come back to the individual as well. But obviously, if you are in a high income, the more that you can get into your self-managed super fund or super in general, bearing in mind there's different non-concessional and concessional contribution caps. That's a great way to offset your high income. And then once again, the more that you're getting into your super fund, the more that you're able to invest in property or invest in other different asset classes through having a self-managed super fund. It gives you a much greater range of different investments that you can invest with your super, as opposed to a traditional industry or retail super fund. Can be quite limited with the areas of investment. So yeah, ultimately, the more you're getting in there, and super is such a tax effective environment as well. Like I said, 15% tax while you're going through that accumulation phase of your life. And then from age 60 onwards, like I said, provided that there's some good planning done, then we can move a good portion of your super, if not most of it, into pension phase. And from that point onwards, it's all tax-free on income and capital gains.
Fantastic. I think that's a really good insight, that tax benefits, someone's on 40 or 50 cents paying in the dollar, being able to contribute into their super fund. I know a lot of clients are going that way to, reduce some tax they're paying. And, at least with the self-managed super fund, I guess the big benefit is people have got control of their asset. And, if they're contributing contributions into the super fund, they can actually see the loan of the property coming down, which is a real incentive to plug that money into that super, to have a debt-free property at retirement to sell,
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's plenty of people that are quite interested in property investing. They may have done a lot outside of through their own personal name or through different trusts and company structures. So it's something that they're a lot more comfortable with. They can see and feel the property as a hard asset. So I guess being able to do the same with your super or your retirement savings, which for a lot of people is one of their main investments in life, with what they've got in super there. So it's just another way to further build on a property portfolio that they've got started already, or like I sort of touched on at the start, maybe they haven't been able to get into the property investment market but have wanted to, but could do so through their super.
Yeah, great. I think that's pretty much wrapped up all the questions, Simon, by the look of it. If anyone's got any other questions, if they can please just pop them in the chat box now. If you'd like to speak to Simon, myself, a call afterwards, or in the next few days, just please put a message in the chat box and we can reach out. But thank you, Simon. I think it's been really insightful, and those changes, and there's a lot of interest in self-managed super funds. I have a lot of clients asking. I can't answer those questions, so having you available as a specialist gives them that confidence and guidance, and making sure before they make that decision that they understand the consequences and what's involved in setting up a a self-managed super fund before they rush in and just sign it. Because even a property contract, you know, I had a case recently where the client secured the property, but then it was in the super fund name, and the name was wrong, so they had to get it corrected a few times. So I think it's really important that it's set up correctly, because there's devils in the detail, as they say, and a property purchase contract in a super fund, the wording has to be exactly right. And I can speak from experience on that one. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's another thing is I've heard of stories in the past where people have purchased a property in their own name because they haven't understood the process, and then they've, you know, the goal has been to have it through a self-managed super fund, but they've purchased it in their own name originally, and then they've gone to transfer it, but then now they're up for the stamp duty and any other associated costs because it wasn't done properly the first time. So yeah, you're definitely right, Geoff. The devil is in the details, and getting it done the right way from the start obviously is done, you know, it saves any unnecessary costs or penalties and trying to nut it out yourself.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you everyone for attending tonight. I hope everyone's got some, you know, great value. You can see, you know, majority of people have hung around right to the end. So obviously there's a lot of interest in self-managed super funds, and speaking to yourself, Simon, I think it's been a great insight tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And appreciate your time as well, Geoff, and everyone for joining in. Yeah, like Geoff touched on, hope you've got some valuable information. And we will be emailing everyone a copy of tonight's recording. So obviously you can go through that. And, you know, if you'd like to book a time with either Geoff or myself to discuss in more detail with your own personal circumstances, we can arrange that as well. And there'll be a booking link in the email. But thanks again, everyone, for joining in, and look forward to speaking to you again soon in respect to how we can help.
Yep. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Been a great session.
No worries. Thank you. Actually, I think, Sanjeev, you got any other questions there? No worries at all. Thanks, Sanjeev, for joining as well, and speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye.